Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. The reception was perfect, or so I thought. My heart was racing as I watched him stand up for his speech. But instead of the sweet words I expected, he raised his glass and slurred, "I don't even love her." My stomach dropped. I thought I heard him wrong. Surely, this was some sick joke? But no one laughed. The room fell silent. The eyes of all our guests were locked on me. I froze. I couldn't move, speak, or even breathe. Laughter echoed, but it wasn't the kind I was hoping for. He grinned like it was funny, but I felt every word slicing through me. My heart was beating wildly, and my mind was racing, trying to process what he just said. I looked at my parents. My mother was in shock. My father was red with fury. I wanted to run, to scream, to ask him what the hell was going on, but my body just wouldn't move. The man I thought I knew had just broken me. He kept talking, still laughing, but it wasn't funny anymore. "We all know this was a mistake, don't we?" he slurred, looking around the room. His eyes were glassy. Was this really happening? Was this some cruel joke? Was it even him speaking, or had someone else taken over? The guests shuffled uncomfortably, whispers filling the air. I felt like I was drowning in the pressure. My heart was racing, my hands shaking, but my feet were glued to the floor. I felt my maid of honor's hand in mine, her grip tight. She whispered, "You have to do something." But what was there to do? How could I fix this? My wedding, my beautiful, perfect day, was crumbling in front of my eyes. I was supposed to be the happiest I'd ever been, but instead, I was standing in front of a room full of strangers, crying in disbelief. My dreams shattered. Every moment we had shared felt like a lie, a cruel trick. The DJ, awkwardly trying to salvage the mood, restarted the music, but it did nothing. No one was dancing. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for me to react. I tried to smile, but it was fake. My lips were trembling, and the tears were fighting to escape. What had I done to deserve this? I looked at my husband. No, the man I thought was my husband, and all I saw was a stranger. His eyes were dull, detached, as though he were speaking to someone else. "Oh, come on," he continued, still slurring. "Don't make this worse than it is." But it was already worse. He had just confessed to the one thing I never expected. The words felt like knives, cutting through everything I thought we were. I thought he loved me. I thought this was the beginning of forever. Instead, it felt like the beginning of the end. I could hear my heart breaking with each word he spoke. Each laugh he gave made the situation more surreal. "Isn't this what weddings are all about?" he asked, as though he were the one making sense. "It's all just a big show anyway, right?" I couldn't breathe. He didn't even care. All of those late nights we spent talking about the future, our plans, the life we dreamed of together, it had all been lies. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to know why. But my voice was lost in the chaos swirling around me. I couldn't find the words to fight back. My heart felt like it was in my throat. Guests were starting to shift uncomfortably. Some were even standing, slowly backing away. The looks on their faces were a mix of shock and pity, but mostly disbelief. My best friend, who had been there for me through everything, was now whispering urgently in my ear, telling me to say something. But what could I say? What was there left to say when the man I loved had just confessed he never loved me? He kept going. "I was drunk when I proposed, too. So, this isn't a surprise, right?" His words rang out like a slap in the face. I felt dizzy. I wanted to disappear, to run away from this nightmare. But where could I go? The wedding, the guests, the entire room was watching. The weight of it was unbearable. I thought I might faint. I kept hearing the words replaying in my head. "I don't even love her," over and over. The best man, visibly uncomfortable, tried to intervene, but he wasn't strong enough to stop him. "Dude, stop," he said, trying to pull him away. But my husband just laughed again, louder this time. "Relax. It's not like I lied at the altar, right?" His voice was mocking now. The pain was suffocating, and every part of me wanted to collapse. I couldn't stop crying. The entire room felt like it was closing in on me, and all I wanted was to escape. I looked around the room, desperately searching for someone to help me make sense of this, but no one could. My legs felt like jelly, but I couldn't move. How could he do this to me? How could I be standing here, a joke at my own wedding? Every glance from the guests felt like a burning reminder of what he just said. His words echoed in my head, louder than anything else. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a choked sob. As he laughed, he raised his glass again, as if celebrating his own cruelty. "To the greatest mistake I've ever made," he shouted, drawing more uncomfortable laughter from the crowd. But it wasn't funny. It wasn't even close. I couldn't breathe. The man I had thought I would spend the rest of my life with was standing there, drunk and cruel, tearing apart the very fabric of our marriage in front of our closest friends and family. My heart sank deeper with each passing second. I wanted to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. My body refused to obey. I was paralyzed, a silent witness to my worst nightmare unfolding. "You should have known better," he slurred, as though it was all my fault. This whole thing was a joke. His words stabbed at me, each one more painful than the last. How could he be so heartless, so indifferent to everything we'd built together? The guests had stopped laughing, but no one knew what to do. My mother was in tears, her face pale with shock. My father, who had been so proud of this day, was now fuming, trying to calm himself down. Everyone was waiting for me to react, to say something, to make it better. But I couldn't. There was nothing I could say to fix this. The man I married was a stranger, and I was the fool who had walked down that aisle. "Do something," my maid of honor whispered again, her eyes full of panic. But how could I? I was drowning in embarrassment, the weight of his confession crushing me. I wanted to scream, to demand that he explain himself, but there were no words that could fix this. My dream wedding had just turned into my worst nightmare, and the man I loved was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was only a broken version of him, a version I never knew existed. I looked at him, hoping for some sign that he didn't mean it, but his eyes were vacant, empty of any remorse. He wasn't sorry. He didn't care. His words had been a declaration, not of regret, but of freedom. I was nothing more than a casualty of his indifference. I thought about all the times he'd promised me he would never hurt me, but this was worse than anything I could have imagined. This was a betrayal I couldn't undo. "Well, this is awkward," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Looking around the room, the tension was palpable. People were starting to leave, some in disgust, others in confusion. I wanted to run with them, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I just stood there, frozen in place. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to find a way to wake up from this nightmare. But this was no dream. This was my reality. I could feel the sting of tears in my eyes. I wanted to look away, to shut it all out, but I couldn't. I had to face it. He had just shattered everything. "You're all probably wondering why we're even here," he continued, laughing bitterly. "It was all just for show, wasn't it?" Each word felt like a slap, each syllable digging into me deeper. The people who had come to celebrate with us were now witnessing my deepest humiliation. "Why?" I finally whispered, the word escaping from my lips before I could stop it. He turned to look at me, his face blank. There was no apology, no remorse in his eyes. "Why what?" he asked, as though I were the one who had done something wrong. "Why did you do this?" I demanded, my voice growing stronger. He shrugged, his indifference cutting through me like a knife. "You already know the answer." That was it. That was all I would get. The music had stopped completely. The room was silent except for the sound of my heartbeat, pounding in my chest. I stood there, in front of everyone, feeling completely exposed. He had just told the truth, and the truth was more painful than anything I could have imagined. It was as if he had peeled back every layer of our relationship, exposing the raw, ugly truth I wasn't ready to face. And now, everyone else knew it too. I couldn't even look at him anymore. Every glance made my skin crawl. How had I not seen this? All those late nights, the moments we'd shared, and I never once questioned him. Now, it was all unraveling. My world was spinning, and I was barely holding on to reality. He was standing there, unbothered, and I was sinking deeper into this nightmare. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked, barely able to control my voice. He didn't even flinch. He shrugged casually, as if what was happening didn't matter to him. "It's not like I owe anyone an explanation," he said, almost like a child dismissing a problem. The words hit me harder than anything else. It wasn't just that he didn't love me, it was that he didn't care. He didn't care about me, about us, or about the life we had planned. It was all a lie. And now, everyone knew the truth, and there was no going back from it. The silence in the room grew heavier. The guests were still there, some frozen in place, some whispering among themselves. My parents were trying to hold it together, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes. This wasn't the marriage they had dreamed of for me. It wasn't the one I had dreamed of either. My whole life had been built on the belief that love could overcome anything, but now, that belief felt like a distant fantasy. He looked around the room, as if expecting a reaction, but the tension was suffocating. "Well, if no one's gonna say anything," he muttered, "then I guess I'll go." And just like that, he turned and walked out. No apologies, no remorse, just nothing. I stood there, feeling the weight of every word, every moment, crashing down on me. He had just walked out of our wedding, of our life together, and I didn't know how to move forward from here. I couldn't stay in that room anymore. I couldn't bear to be around all those people, to have them look at me with pity. My legs finally gave way, and I collapsed onto the nearest chair. The tears came freely now. The pain was unbearable. I had married a man who didn't love me, who never did, and now he was gone. My heart felt shattered, and all the plans we had made, the life we had promised, it all seemed meaningless. My maid of honor, still in shock, came over to me. She tried to comfort me, but nothing could fix this. I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. Answers, closure, something to explain how this had happened. But there was no simple explanation. He had never loved me, and now, I had to live with that truth. I thought I knew him, I whispered, more to myself than to her. But I didn't. I never did. The man I had married was a stranger. People were starting to leave, their voices a dull hum in the background. No one knew what to say. I didn't know what to say. The ceremony had been a sham, a farce. The guests had come to celebrate a marriage that was never real. And now, they were leaving, not knowing how to handle the aftermath. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," I said softly, as if speaking to the empty room. But it had already happened. There was no turning back. I couldn't stop replaying the moment over and over in my mind. His words, his laughter, his complete disregard for me, it all haunted me. How had I not seen this coming? How had I been so blind? The man I loved had just destroyed everything we had built. I felt so foolish, so naive. All the dreams I'd held onto for years were slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The day felt like a blur. My best friend stayed with me, refusing to leave my side. But even her presence couldn't erase the feeling of emptiness inside me. I had spent so long believing in this fairy tale, and now it was shattered. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked gently. But I knew the answer before I even heard it. He wouldn't. He was gone, and so was my hope for a future with him. My world had just been turned upside down. I spent the rest of the night alone, staring at the empty space where he had been just hours ago. My wedding dress lay discarded on the bed, a symbol of a dream that would never come true. I had no idea what the future held. All I knew was that my life, my entire reality, had just been ripped apart. The man I had trusted with my heart had destroyed it in one moment. And I had to figure out how to live without him, without us. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.